Right.
But, the takedown on this system is not happening by chance. It's being done deliberately. It's very difficult to figure out their timing and how they're going to do it. But they're in the process of doing it. And, we have inflationary depression. And that'll last for at least a couple of years. Unless something really radical happens to the system that they didn't anticipate. And then after a couple of years, we'll go into deflation, and it'll be horrible. But that's what they should have done in the first place, purge the system. They were unwilling to do it because they wanted everything in place. At the same time, they take the economy down using deflationary depression, then they will have another war, a big one. And so that's what we're headed for here. And it's not hard to figure out. You just read the history books. It's all there. One civilization after another. Whether it was in France or in Italy or England or America, it's all the same.
Nothing new under the sun. I don't know if you've ever noticed in Genesis the story of Joseph. Always it amuses me because in the Bible schools they teach us that Joseph, he interpreted the Egyptian Pharaoh's dreams, and he saw that there were 7 bad years coming, and so he squirreled away a bunch of grain in the granaries during the 7 good years so they'd have grain to give to people during the 7 bad years. And that's the way that story is presented. But if you read the Bible, it tells you what he actually did. Yeah, he squirreled the grain away during the 7 good years, and when the famine hit, and the people said, "Why should we starve?" He said, "I'll give you grain if you give me all your money." And the people of Egypt did. And then in the 2nd year, the people came back and said, "Why should we starve?" And he said, "I'll give you grain if you give me all your cattle." And the people did. And the 3rd year of the famine, they came back, and he said, they wanted grain again so they could live. And he said, "I'll give you grain if you agree to be the property, the slaves of the Pharaoh of Egypt." And the people agreed to it. And the point I'm making is that you can trace some of this ability to manipulate the entire society by means of economics. You can find it right there in Genesis in the Bible. And nobody reads it. Nobody pays attention. But he explains he put the people of Egypt into bondage. And he wasn't just the good guy that a lot of people imagine Joseph to be. And I'm not sure if that resonates with anyone else, but it resonates with me. It's nothing new under the sun. They've been doing it all along, and people just don't pay attention.
That's an excellent example, because that's just what these people are doing today. It's being done a little bit differently, and they've done it many times before, so obviously they knew the story in the 12th century and the 15th century and the 20th century.
And the reason they're able to get away with it is because the vast majority of people just don't read or pay attention. And they really don't do much thinking. The evidence is there if you care to look at it. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that. But 90% or more, probably more like 95% of the American people, really won't do their due diligence, and therefore they are bamboozled again and again and again.
Well, you're right about that. Half the people in the country are functionally illiterate.
Yeah.
And then you have people that say, "Hey, I'm too busy. I'm working 2 jobs. I can't even see my kids, and I'm supposed to look into that." Forget it.
Yep.
And the people who are doing these kinds of things, they know that. And they also know that, Americans are stocking up on food and weapons because they think something's coming, and there is something coming. I don't know what it is, but it's coming.
When it comes to food, how much do you suppose we might need? Worst case scenario, do you personally believe we ought to be stocking up? And if so, how long a supply should a person have?
Well, I deeply believe in that, and I think that the average person in their family should have at least 6 months. And they should zero in on dehydrated and freeze-dried foods because they'll keep a long time. And zero in on things that you normally eat. If you have the land and the weather, I would start using that land to do some growing of crops. I'm not talking about 1,000 bushels of wheat, but I'm talking about things, again, you like and normally eat: radishes, green beans, things like that. And,
I understand.
Pardon me?
I just said I understand.
And my daughter gets 4 crops a year. She lives in Florida. And it supplies right now 10% of the food for her family.
Oh.
So, that's a good thing. So that's my feeling on it. She has a 2-year supply of food, but whatever you can afford, to each his own. But I think it's very, very, very important. And then the second line of defense is preserving your wealth by being in gold and silver, coins and shares. And the coins are the first line of defense. And, of course, Melody does those. And I think, as each day goes on, we can see more and more of the things that we're telling people are true, and more people are realizing there's a problem in some of them, what it is. And there'll come a time when it'll be very difficult because so many people want coins and guns and ammunition and food. You won't be able to get them. And that's probably a ways away, but not too far. I mean, what happens in the future is in part, and sometimes in great part, engineered by the people behind the scenes, the Illuminati. But there are things that happen that they can't control, which could bring the system down sooner at a time when they don't want it to come down. So, there's all sorts of configurations that can happen here. And we just don't know. And so, people go out and they buy life insurance for their family, and particularly for the breadwinner or the breadwinners. And they do that anticipating that there could be a problem. Well, what I've just told you is for the same reason. It's insurance.
Yeah.
You're insuring that you're going to be able to eat. If you got a filter, you can get water no matter what, as long as you can make it come out of the ground someplace. And you can be able to protect your family. That's insurance. And in this day and age, that's more important insurance than any insurance policy. The insurance policy is the gold and silver. And that's where it is, because that will protect your assets. Even if gold and silver were not to go up, let's say that they stayed the same, everything else is going to be going down 60 to 95%. So you're a big winner because you own gold and silver and it didn't go down. Although I do feel that gold and silver related assets will sell considerably higher from where they are now. And so I think we've got the formula. The people who have been listening the last 10 years on my programs, with Melody for the last 5 years with me, or more than that now, they've done well. Some of them have done very well. I got a letter this morning from a fellow, and his gold and silver investments are off a little bit. But he said, you got me out of the market at $13,700, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for that. And so, being in a position where you don't do the wrong thing is as important as doing the right thing. And what I mean by that is avoiding loss is far more important than gaining.
Exactly.
A good defense is a strong offense. And we're seeing that now with the Federal Reserve. They're attacking, knowing there's a chance for that legislation, the H.R. 1207, to investigate and audit the Fed. And that's why the government is turning over to the Federal Reserve all of these different jobs of watching derivatives and banks and so on. It's all a scam. Why should some private company be given those responsibilities? Forget it. It's a scam. And Congress knows it. But I'll tell you one thing. Congress is inundated with people screaming, we want that legislation.
Yeah. It has to be, or it wouldn't have gone as far as it has. I mean, if there was a strong political pressure for it, any congressman who thought about it, he would have been bought off without any trouble. They have to choose between the power and money of the Federal Reserve and one way or another receiving some perks or risking the ire of their constituents, and it puts them in